Fredrik Reinfeldt. He was the Prime Minister of Sweden from 2006 to 2014, and the chairman of the Liberal Conservative Moderator Party from 2003 to 2015. At age of 41, very young age, he was the third youngest person to become the Prime Minister of Sweden. He was the last rotating president of European Council in 2009. His first term in office, which started in 2006, was marked by the financial crisis that you already know, and recession of economic recession. And he was re-elected in 2010 because he restored the economy of Sweden to put it into a very strong position. So his popularity was increased. So he was re-elected. It was very good for him. And his policy always focused on getting more people on the job, which is related to today's topic, and giving priorities in climate change and healthcare issues. He implemented an open-door immigration policy, right?
Yes.
During his tenure as a Prime Minister. He stepped down from his office and leaving the party and became an author, consultant, and advisor and lecturer. And today he is going to talk about the changing labor market due to the disruptive technological development in education and how educational system must adapt to it. And he will also talk about the power relationship between US and China, yeah. You said? Okay, which is related a little bit remote to the main topic, but you can link probably. Please give him a big applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, good morning to you all and greetings from Sweden and Europe. Although very distant apart, you should know that we have a lot of similarities, not only that our autumns are very beautiful with all the colors, but also the stable democracies, even though, of course, Sweden is much smaller in population than South Korea. We have actually done the same kind of trip from coming out of poverty, getting growth, getting healthier, getting better living conditions for our populations, relating to growth and to be open to trade. So we are very distant apart, but in many, many instances very close to each other. I'm going to talk about change. Change is very often something described as 100% positive. My experience is that people love change as long as it has nearly no impact on themselves. So change is needed for other people, not for me. When change comes to yourself, I've seen many people get stressed and nervous because they have not been well prepared. They have not understood what is coming. Therefore, I think it's important to relate to the global changes that we see, and out of that, draw 5 conclusions which links to individual when it comes to educational system and the labor market. The first, I think, obvious on a day when we have midterm elections in the United States is the fact that we have a geopolitical power shift in the world between the United States and China. It relates, of course, to an increasing risk of a trade war between the two giants, but it has an impact that is actually global. It has an impact on the trading conditions also for other parts of the world. And of course, the question is the world moving away from a rules-based open world trade system that we have lived with since the Second World War over to a system where countries declare their own country's interest first above everything else and engage in protectionism? This is far more important than just related to one country. Why? Because, especially for open economies like South Korea and Sweden, I've seen all these entrepreneurs with their growing companies and very early on in their career, they become export-oriented. Why? Because the home market is too small. So you must be able to sell your products, and in the future also services and your digital services to others. Therefore, you need to meet good rule-based conditions when you trade cross-border. If the new world is creating new and higher thresholds to come into different markets, this might impact our labor markets and especially our biggest companies. The multinational companies that are very often our champions and that we think are forever there to be stronger, but they rely heavily on open trade, which is now put in question. Secondly, and this has also been mentioned now already a few times, what is called the fourth technological revolution. We have, of course, a rapid technological change in the world. This is also very often described as something with just possibilities, just positive. I see, of course, this. There is a lot of new jobs, there is a lot of new innovations that comes out of this. You could see a lot of young people actually starting up with new ideas. I think that's fascinating. But it's also very good in the English language to describe it as disruptive. The ways we have been doing things will not work anymore. It's disruptive in the sense that it shortens the lifespan of all markets, of all companies, of all what we have thought to be safe jobs. Why? Because the changes in the economy will come with an increase in speed, and what very often has been done with manual labor will in the future be done with artificial intelligence and with robots. So the shift is more dramatic than we think, and it has not fully happened yet. I saw a tryout to see the implication on the American labor market. It was an Oxford study who said that might be as much as 47% of the jobs that we have today that actually will be totally gone or totally different in 20 years. We recalculated this on European labor markets and my home labor market of Sweden, and we found the impact to be even greater. So we are talking more than 50% of the jobs gone in 20 years or totally different. This does not mean that we will not see new jobs emerge in other parts of the economy, but the question you must ask yourself, is these new jobs open to the ones who lost the jobs that now are gone? Are the individuals movable from one job to another? So I'm not saying we will have less jobs. The question is, what's the impact on the individual level for each and every one of us? When change knocks on your door, are you ready for the digital transformation? And the fact is that a lot of people are not. And instead of trying to embrace and understand what comes, they become part of a movement we see around the world of anti-globalization, saying, this is not about me. This is not my future, it's not creating anything good for me. And we see them getting angry in the voting boxes of Europe, United States, and throughout the world. So don't think this is a little question. This is the question on how to make inclusive labor markets, inclusive impacts of what is, first of all, something very good. But the biggest change, the biggest global change of all is to mankind itself. It has been mentioned that we have a rapid world growth of the population. We are now at 7.5 billion inhabitants on this world, and we will grow up to 10, maybe 11 billion at the end of this century. But as you know, this is done asymmetrically. It's not done evenly in all countries. We already see a standstill in the most developed parts of the world, like Europe, China, linked to the peak child phenomena. The more developed an economy becomes, the less children born by women. Therefore, the situation in Europe is a de facto decrease of the population. It's a standstill of 500 million, but the population as such is decreasing. Until 2050, with the aging of the population, we will have 85 million less in the labor force in European countries 2050 compared to now. If you think that's a huge impact, look at China. The decrease is over 200 million people moving out from the labor market into pension age. This is an enormous transformation in our time, and it comes asymmetrically. The growth of the world population will be concentrated to the least developed part of the world, and after 2050, only concentrated to the African continent, where in many of the African countries we will face an increase of the population which is 5-fold compared to today. So it's a totally new world order where you will find the African population at the end of this century come close to the population of Asia. Have we prepared for this? Have we understand what kind of challenges this will create to sustainability, to our labor markets? I think already we have a discussion of shortages of labor supply in Europe and United States. This is only the beginning, given what we see ahead. At the same time, my experts at home tell me that in the most developed part of the world, it might be that half of the children now born in Sweden will live to be 100 years old. So now, welcome the 100-year life. It will be not just 1 or 2 odd survivors that will see their own 100th birthday. This will be for very many people. And the enormous increase of older people is really the biggest transformation that we have ahead. When we move from 7.5 up to 10, 11 billion people, there will be no more children, no more teenagers, and they will redistribute more to Africa, less in Europe and in Asia. No more 30-year-olds, no more 40-year-olds. The increase is in above ages of 60, taking real increase when you come above the age of 80. If this is true, if everything I've now said is going to happen, then we must draw conclusions. What's the impact on the individual level, on the labor market, and on our educational system? And I have 5 conclusions. The first one, there is no such thing as an identity linked to your job that you choose when you're young and never, ever change during your lifespan. Very often we have the idea that we take a decision as young to become a teacher, to become a policeman. That's part of our identity, an identity we bring through our lives and which becomes very important to us because it's who we are. So if people ask, who are you? You answer by telling what you work with, which is of course only part of your identity. But if I now told the truth about everything that is disruptive, what about half of the jobs gone in 20 years? And that's your identity. That means the identity will get lost for a lot of people. We must therefore be clear to people saying, your job is not your identity. It's your ability to work that is part of your identity. That is how we open up to rethinking, reskilling, retraining people. Don't say that you are something that you can't change. And since it's linked to identity, it's tougher. It sits deeper with people. If this is true, there is no such thing as a once-in-a-lifetime education part done in young years, which is never to be done again. The idea that we have longer and longer educational systems, preschool, school, high schools, and then universities, but we do it only once. And thereafter, we think, after leaving universities, if we have done so, we think we can live on that through our entire working career, never to see a school book anymore. That's also the wrong perception. Because what we used to learn if the transformation is as big as I have described, well, it will be obsolete in 10 and absolutely obsolete in 20 years. You must be able to reskill and retrain also when it comes to educational efforts. And we don't have the structures for this. We just think we should add on more years when we are young. But I think it's equally important now to get educational systems. It could be public ones, but it could also be linked inside our companies, where we actually try to get more skills, update ourselves to stay employable also in the future. If this is true, the idea that talent is something you have when you're young once, and you're either successful or then it's gone, is also totally wrong. But that's how we recruit people. We think that we should seek them out at universities, the one with the top scores coming out of universities, that's the one we want to employ. The one person better than the others that we could form and see growing inside our company. That was yesterday. Talent is now something which is open all through your life. You could be a talent at 25, you can be a talent at 45, you could be a talent at 65. It's more your mindset. Have you taken the decision to stay open, to take in new impulses, and to start over and over again in your life with new careers? You could actually reinstall yourself as a talent at different ages. This is a main point when it comes to recruitment, because if talent can be a 45-year-old restarting a second career with a new identity after reskilling, well, then we have a totally new perception of talents. Talents all through life. And then we should not just only focus on getting the youngest ones, but actually different ages. This is also important because the impact on the labor market of that is that also older people see that the only way to get a chance at a career is not just being a talent at 28. I could actually get a job, a restart at 45. And just to remind you, what defines a talent at 28 might be very different when you're 45 or you're 55. You have a life experience. As you know, nothing is that simple in life. It's not just a success. You might see trouble. You might have private problems. You might have friends, families, children that run into trouble. This gives you new experiences and creates you more interesting, a kind of talent that knows a lot of things which you don't know when you're young. One thing, though, that is very important, if you're 50, 55 and want to be a talent, don't tell people that the only thing you want to tell them is what you used to do. People are not interested in that. Tell them what you aim to do still in the future, in the years to come. And be humble. Say, I'm not perfect at everything. I understand that 20-year-olds are technically more skilled and advanced than I am, but I'm open to learn, and I'm interested. That is creating more of a talent that others can see. We don't like people who say, well, I've learned everything I need, I know everything I need to know, and I'm just here to tell you the story. Not interesting. Not interesting. Be humble, be more employable by also being open to move yourself, to add your skills. If all of this is true, then the idea that the smartest thing you can do, which is very spread here in South Korea and also my country, Sweden, is not to be employed by the #1 biggest company in the country. Why? Well, because the biggest companies are the most likely to be disruptive by the challenges you will see in the markets that is now emerging. Their success will be challenged by others, because that's the idea with the new atmosphere for entrepreneurs, the new ideas emerging. They are looking at the front runners. How did they get successful? How do I reshape the market? And therefore, most of these very big companies that we see today will probably have to downscale themselves in the future. I've seen this happen already with multinational companies in Sweden, and young people think, if I just get a job there, then I'm safe for life. And I can tell you, you have no idea. They might not even be around 20 years from now. Therefore, we must signal that we can not only look at big companies as a way of getting job security in what is now going to be the labor market of the future. No, now you must focus much more on startups, on entrepreneurial projects, what is coming from behind, what is growing out of the grass, because they are more likely to survive at least a little bit longer. So, if all of this is true, we must also shift our perspective when it comes to labor market policy. I was grown up in an atmosphere that the idea was by driving demand, pushing in demand into the economy, when there come a slowdown in the economy, which we always will see, we thought by pushing in demand we could save the jobs. The problem is that it's a little bit shaky now, but soon it will be back again the way it was. We have learned that that's not true anymore. The global changes I've described will not recreate jobs as they were, but as something completely different. Therefore, we must shift focus from increasing demand broadly in the economy to incentivizing individuals to become employable, to reskilling, to retraining, focus on the individuals, on their motivation, on their ability to see possibilities throughout life. And throughout life, meaning if we're lived to be 100 years old, probably to push also older people to stay in the workforce with incentives. We had specific tax breaks in Sweden for 65 plus to stay in the labor market, and they have answered to the incentives because they do. When they get more money out of working, and when they could also ask of the employer actually not to work as much as before, but still be part of the workforce, we saw a doubling of the percentage of people above the age of 65 actually keep on working in the workforce. This is just the beginning. If we do all of this, then we will meet the changes by preparing individuals for what is about to come. If we do so, we will have greater support for what we call globalization, fourth industrial revolution. Then it's not just something said by an elite at conferences that do not relate to ordinary people. If we don't do this, then reactions we see out in the voter boxes of the world will continue and increase. So it's extremely important to do this right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the inspiring talk. We have about 16 minutes, and I will allocate 10 minutes for our dialogue and 6 minutes to the audience to collect the questions. Okay. When I was a PhD student about 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we studied about your system of welfare state. Yeah. And we learned a lot. And when we were about to copy your system in our country, you moved away from it.
Yes.
You escaped from it. Yeah. Can you explain why in terms of the topics that you talked today?
Well, the good thing with getting wealthier as a nation is that you can afford to erase poverty. And we have done so through our welfare schemes. No one should be without any resources in Sweden. But what happened was that this was also linked to the idea that job security is getting the same job when you're young, keeping it through life. If we have a slowdown of the economy, we push in subsidies, and by doing so, we think we can get the same jobs to stay on. And we learned that's not true anymore. That's why we shifted. We're not saying that we're taking away our different welfare schemes. We're just saying they should all the time make it more worth working than not working.
So labor market flexibility is the key concept.
Yes, but labor market, it has to take into account, though, that throughout life there will be challenges. We want men and women to have a family. They will be sick, sometimes short, sometimes longer, and your welfare systems should be prepared to support this. And if you lose your job, that should not be the ruin of you and your family, because then people will get afraid, and afraid people do not want to change.
Okay. You mentioned that more than half of the jobs will disappear in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
So that people will have to have multiple jobs over his lifetime.
That's
Does
right.
that mean that you are a kind of optimist that new jobs will be created, more and more jobs? Because they have to change their jobs if there is a job.
Yeah. Well, what we have seen so far, because a lot of the automation, a lot of the digital technology is already disrupting our economy since, well, a couple of decades ago, and it's increasing. Somewhere around 600,000 jobs are gone, linked to automation, and a lot of what is coming in Sweden, but it has been replaced with even more jobs. I think it relates very much to what kind of incentives you create in the labor market. We have seen a growth of you could call it service economy in the Swedish economy, which has been very important. So you also need to be clear on the fact that you need different kind of jobs. Not everyone could be academic scholars. There also need to be jobs that fits for those that are not had the best of school results. But if you do so, if you incentivize all people, our experiences until now anyhow, that yes, we'll see new jobs emerge all the time.
Okay, so in a sense you are an optimist.
I'm an optimist, but it also relates to what kind of policy and what you're trying to do. It relates to that you understand what kind of changes that are now happening in the world.
You also mentioned about the identity crisis.
Yeah.
If you ask people, who are you, then I would say I am a professor, I am a lawyer, or
Exactly.
I am a carpenter. But in the future, if I ask the people, who are you, then what would replace the jobs to identify themselves? Have you thought about it before?
Well, we see a lot of people actually relating more to profiles in social media and other kind of interests, and that might grow in the future. I think that we will hear more and more people say, well, in the first part of my life I was a professor, now I'm doing something completely different. We see a rapid rise of self-employed, a kind of entrepreneurs who actually work just for themselves, which creates a kind of flexibility. And a lot of them have a hard time to actually explain what they are, but they can say that they are businessmen or entrepreneurs or something like that. A lot of the jobs, as you can see, that come forward, a lot of older people cannot even relate what those jobs are. We don't understand them, and that's also part of why this is reshaping so quickly, because it's hard to understand a lot of the jobs that are now created for the 20-plus people. And we should be humble and understand that that's part of this transformation that we are seeing.
Could you explain to the audience what are you doing right now after the Prime Minister position?
Well, that's also an interesting question. I was very young as Prime Minister, but I was also rather young leaving as Prime Minister before my age of 50. And it used to be that politicians leaving in Sweden, as in many other countries, they were supposedly pensioners. But I saw it as a chance to start a second career, and I started my own company. And as you mentioned, I give advice on geopolitical situation to big banks and private equity. I give lectures around Sweden, I write books, and I'm very open to think, as I said to the audience, can I learn new things? Can I work with things that I have not done before? And I think it's very clear that everyone has to, conclude this, even those who has been prime ministers or things like that in the past.
Do you have high popularity as an educator or instructor?
I hope so. Otherwise, I would be in trouble.
Okay. In this room, there are lots of teachers
Yes.
from all different sectors of educational system. In the future, you said there will be multiple jobs, and educational system must change according to it. And can you give us specific advices to the teachers, how they have to change in their field right now?
Well, I don't think I need to tell teachers about also the changes they see. When I went to school, it was very important to learn things by heart. I read it in the book, and then I should know it without having the book, and they tested me that I knew these things, all the important years for the kings of Sweden, what did they do and what did they didn't do. Now they can Google everything of this, so they don't need to learn this by heart, but there are different skills that is now needed. If the changes I've described are correct, you will have a much more work with individuals, what we call human resources, because you need to coach, support, help people through this transformation, through these changes. I think projects will be much different because if I'm right on seeing these new business cycles, the climate in business life will be tougher. The reshaping will go quicker. So by leading means new challenges, which I think was very also important for teachers. And one new thing, in this era of everything declared as fake news, we need to understand what is actually scientific proofed evidence and what is just talks, populism, not news that you should adhere to. How could you see what is good and what is bad in your mobile phones, on all the information you get, and to teach the young to see this critically will be of utmost importance.
In every country, including Korea, educational system is based on standardized curriculum because it inherited from mass educational system. What you are talking about in the future, there are multiple jobs. The education must be personalized to meet the need of specific individuals. So how do we do this? Because it is too costly to change that system into personalized educational system.
Well, you make a combination. We also have a standardized curriculum, but we have narrowed it down to not all different items. We say that we have a few core things that we need to learn, which relate to language and mathematics, for instance. But we give an opportunity from younger years to make more choice, and especially when they get older, and therefore make it more individual at the same time. And we increase coaching support, and I would say that a lot of our teachers are more coaching mentors for youngsters than they used to be. So we already see this development. I think we should understand it's natural given my description of what is to come.
Yeah, right. You also mentioned about this longevity revolution. People can live up to 100 years.
Yes.
Which means that the freshmen at Yonsei University this year will live up to 2,100 years.
Yes.
But the lifespan of knowledge that you are teaching is getting smaller and smaller, narrower and narrower.
Yes.
So in certain scientific field, it may be 7 years to take half of the knowledge obsolete. So how we should teach at the university? Because they live up to 100 years, and the knowledge is getting obsolete very quickly. What should we teach then?
We should teach them to be more critical about everything they hear and read, so that they can make up their own mind and find their pathways through own decisions. Not so much learning by heart, learning by reading other books, but actually understanding what is information, what is news, what is critical viewing of everything that is said by leaders around the world. and we need to increase this rapidly, because everyone says, yes, we understand that, but I've been living with media coverage for many years, and I can say that a lot of people actually believe everything they see in the press, both the things that are actually accurate and those things that are not. And therefore, we see a division in our society where a growing number of people have the totally wrong conception of our society. And in portions, that creates extremism, where subgroups actually can say that our country is on the downfall. This is very popular. We see threats everywhere. We are threatened by everyone. And by increasing that kind of rage and nervousness towards others, you will see a rise of the exact same kind of extremism that we have had very many troubles with in Europe. And the only way to actually bounce back on that is by teaching more about critical viewing. Critical viewing. And I think that's more important, exactly as you say, because a lot of the education will be obsolete, and therefore we also need to retrain and get back and learning more, and also doing it integrated in our work life.
In fact, I'm collecting questions from the floor using modern technology, and I was busy looking back and forth, but no collections yet. So I will ask people from the floor directly after one question. This is my last question to you. As the president of university, I want my students to create more jobs, to go to the startups, small companies, and that's your advice.
Yes.
But I failed so far because our parents does not allow their kids to go to a small company.
Yes.
Or start our new venture startups.
Yes.
How do we solve this problem? The parents. The biggest enemy of me is parents.
No, but that's absolutely correct. Because what is the main problem with parents? They can't understand change. I told you, everyone loves change as long as it has no impact on myself. Parents is exactly like that. If a father is asked, what should I do? The father tells what he did. But our children are born and living in a new society with new circumstances. So the idea to give the same example as you did when you were young, choosing a company that was successful, is probably not the right advice. And therefore, let them be entrepreneurial. Let them believe in something and start up and be more humble and ask them to describe what they're doing. You will learn a lot of new things.
Quick poll. How many of you will allow your kids to go to a small company? Please raise your hands. 10%, less than 10%. Can you see?
My goodness. All right.
Well,
you're in for trouble.
Well, I have no time to read this from now. So can you raise hands, and who has sent questions to the pad? Could you raise hands and ask questions directly from the floor? 이정숙 씨, 중앙대학교 신문방송학과. Where is he? No? Okay.
Wow.
Oh, it's a far away. She's running with the microphone, and it takes 2 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 중앙대학교에서 신문방송학 전공을 하고 있는 이정숙이라고 합니다.
잠깐만 기다려요. 트랜슬레이션 볼 때. 네, 지금 나오죠. 네, 시작하시죠.
네, 저는 4차 산업혁명과 불균형에 대해서 질문을 가지고 있는데요. 특권을 가진 이들이 먼저 재분배에 대해 논의하지 않는 한 4차 산업혁명도 여타 산업혁명과 다름없이 불균형을, 특히나 글로벌 불균형을 강화할 가능성이 더 높은 것인지가 제 첫 번째 질문이고요. 두 번째 질문은 이제 4차 산업혁명이 가져올
하나만 해주세요.
아, 네. 이 부분에 대해서 답변을 듣고 싶습니다.
That's exactly what I said. A rich country do not need to have poor people. That's why you need to create welfare systems that apply to all, and that you need to incentivize everyone. And I totally agree that a lot of this fourth industrial revolution is just run by people saying it's only challenges and optimism. But the truth is, we see a tendency with some of the big companies for a winner-takes-all economy, creating enormously big companies with fantastic salaries and dividends to their owners and their top management, but not so much more. And we should not accept this. This is a challenge to the world that will create new inequalities. And I'm on the center-right, so I'm not a socialist. I believe that incentives and inclusiveness is how you create a happier society. So if you don't want ring-fenced societies with more guards and more armored people around you to be safe, then you need to have better living conditions for everyone. And that's possible to do. It's a balancing act, but we have talked a lot about it throughout the European experience, and I've seen most of the European countries have actually found struck that balance. So your question is very good, and that's a kind of challenge that will increase with this tech revolution now rolling in.
Lucy, time is up.
Yes.
And my role is to keep the time very tight.
That's
Thank you very much. Give him the big applause.
Thank you.